this opportunity to, accomplish a single goal that I hope comes across in this presentation, which is to present chills as a non-pharmacological route to non-ordinary experiences, right? Helping to, as you said, democratize access to such states, given how innocuous they are, and they're free from the social, cultural, pharmacological contraindications that kind of prevent a lot of individuals from accessing such potent states. So in that vein, I'll keep it pretty high level and chill. And as unchill as this title is, I'll walk through each word as part of this presentation. All right, so aesthetic chills, what are we talking about? We're talking specifically, people usually know what I'm talking about, the chicken skin, goosebumps, shivers, frisson, that typically looks like this on the skin. But the ones that we're talking about are the ones that are specifically elicited from music, movies, commercials, speeches, etc. What we're not talking about are the types that are evoked by sensitive touch or ASMR. So specifically what we're talking about are what are known as psychogenic shivers or psychogenic chills. So what are chills? We kind of know what they are and what they feel like, but why are they coming about? So I want to give you a little bit of a working theory that we're working with in our work to kind of substantiate some of the outcomes. So I've kind of been referring to chills as this grok event. Like if you're familiar with machine learning, it's this rapid ability to start generalizing to a bunch of unseen information. And I'm also kind of referring it to as the body's belief update receipt, right? Because it seems as though chills come about at these moments when your learning rate reaches a null derivative, to say, right? You've kind of reached an insight at which you're able to account for a greater deal of the variance in unseen events, or of seen events than you had before, right? So it's kind of like that final piece of the jigsaw puzzle falling into place and letting everything click, right? And that's why it kind of happens a lot, and it comes about by surprise. So typically twists in movies, or some cathartic resolution, right, or some emotional resolve. I tend to get them a lot from analogy and metaphor, right, because you're able to rapidly translate domain expertise and knowledge in one area and rapidly accumulate and downregulate prediction error in another. It also helps to kind of think of this from the angle of horror chills as well, where in horror chills you don't even have a model in the first place. So it's actually the genesis of a model, right? So it's almost both the maximal minimization and maximization of prediction error, where chills are presenting. But we're gonna be mostly focusing here on aesthetic chills, which are positively balanced. And this goes in line with a lot of aesthetic thinking, right? Which is that art disrupts habituated perception. And I like to kind of say that chills are what it feels like for a cognitive-based belief update to begin to propagate through both the peripheral and interoceptive nervous system. Okay, so accessible, what do I mean by that? Well, we, in order to operationalize chills and study in the lab, we need to make sure that people are actually getting chills. So in order to do that, we basically scraped YouTube and Reddit for a whole host of different comments about people talking about goosebumps, chills, shivers, etc., and collected a whole host of very moving content and submitted that to thousands, almost 3,000 participants to just simply ask them to watch the content and let us know, did it evoke any chills, right? And this allowed us to kind of identify what we call internally as our bang-X, right? Like very high likelihood that an average individual will be able to get chills from a piece of stimuli that we've identified. So, they are accessible, but they're also very personal, right? And that makes them somewhat predictable as well. So the state you're in matters, right? So we're different from day to day, so how you are matters, right? So that applies to, the level of arousal, your valence, your mood, right? Whether or not you had just had a chill or not, right? The likelihood of getting a chill post-chill is significantly decreased, though if you do get it, the intensity is much stronger. Traits matter as well, who you are as a person, right? Openness to experience, the level of absorption that you get, the amount of extroversion you have, and your just general disposition to positive emotions. And so we've been able to, in the lab, build a set of different models that take into account these stage traits, demographics, and even things that were surprising to us, like political orientation, religiosity, interoceptive awareness, right? That actually kind of can predict whether or not you're going to get chills in general, right? And we took this now one step further after trying to get to know the person, right? We can now be predicting, right, who's gonna get chills from what piece of content, right? So what we've been able to do now in the lab is start matching individuals to pieces of content with the greatest likelihood of eliciting chills, right? So very similar to the way Netflix will use a collaborative filtering algorithm to match you to a piece of content that you're most likely to give a thumbs up to, we can match you to a piece of content after giving you a host of questionnaires that's most likely to elicit chills, right? And something that I'll touch on later is that after we can match you to a piece of content, we can make it even more hyper-personalized now with generative AI, where we can go in and actually, oftentimes it's speeches set to music, and actually slightly edit the content of the speech to be hyper-bespoke, an N of one, very intimate stimulation, so or a piece of content. And I'll get more into that later. So what about this non-ordinary state? Can we say that? Can we substantiate it? And it seems as though, and I just want to clarify quickly that in all of this work, in all of the studies that I'll present, the stimuli is always the same for an individual, except in the more bespoke ones, and we simply post hoc group the participants of whether or not they got chills. So everybody's seeing the same thing, and they're just being separated as a function of whether or not they subsequently reported chills. So in the case of exposing individuals to chills eliciting stimuli, those who report chills seem to also report measures of self-transcendence as measured by the classical indicators, things like increases in ego dissolution, increases in connectedness, increases in social moral elevation. And the fact that this is also combined with the co-occurrence of psychological insight and emotional breakthrough, it kind of started us to think, well, do chills count as a non-pharmacological, micro-mystical experience of sorts? And, so also to the non-ordinary states, so on the phenomenological side, it seems at least somewhat non-ordinary. And on the neural side, right, when we have people report in real time in the lab with a 64-channel EEG, we do begin to see psychedelic-esque changes in entropy and complexity, right, the same measures that you'd see in most leading psychedelic studies. And then we also see, very interestingly, these big drops in theta, which are very, if you're familiar with this, with the wayfinding literature, when you find your way, right, when things kind of make sense again, there's this big theta drop, and we see that this here as well. And interestingly enough, right, we can actually make that non-ordinary state a little more tunable with the use of a prosthetic, right, where we can actually send a hyper-specifically timed code up your spine at times when previous participants had reported getting chills, and actually kind of accentuate and augment the somatic and interoceptive component of the chill experience, right? And when we do that, right, there's actually discrete changes in the neural activity that's associated with some of the positive outcomes, including charitable giving, emotional breakthrough, and psychological insight. And you guys, if you're interested in this, you should see Dr. Christoph Moore's talk in the concurrent session 28 later today at 5 p.m. He'll talk fully about this particular study. So, with this capacity for belief updating, right, and psychedelic adjacent neurophenomenology, we asked, can chills be a therapeutic intervention, right? Can you take a chill pill, right, of sorts? And kind of similar to how the gym can be a probe and promoter of physical fitness, we asked, can chills be both a probe and promoter of well-being? And in some of our standardized, and what's interesting here, right, especially around this debate about the importance of the experience in psychedelics, here the model update is the experience, right? So that's the non-ordinary experience itself. So we asked, okay, well, can we actually intervene in a therapeutic way, specifically to maladaptive schemas? And in a lot of our research, we've shown that when you find stimuli that's specifically targeting self-acceptance, right, we can show an improvement in self-acceptance in those individuals who get chills. And this is mediated by measures like emotional breakthrough. And what about the fact that these chills are just pleasurable, right? What about working in populations that are depressed and numb to things like reward and pleasure, right? So in anhedonic populations, right, when you give them probabilistic reward tasks, they are kind of insensitive to reward, right? They can't make value-directed decisions. If you ask them to choose between a $5 and $20, they'll choose both with equal likelihood, right? But if you find a way to give them chills, this population, they show acute changes in arousal and balance, and they also get restored reward sensitivity. They start acting like normal controls. And if you've ever experienced a population, you can understand that that's a pretty big deal. It's kind of flipping the script. Instead of just trying to mitigate negative affect, this is a promotion of positive affect. And now we ask, can we do schema surgery? Can we get in a little deeper? And this is where we can take a stimulus that we match someone to based on the previous method and actually go in with generative AI and target the schema that we've identified in them through a maladaptive schema questionnaire and a host of interviews, and slightly change it to directly address, confront, and cathartically resolve that schema and provide them with a new perspective. And it's hyper-specific in that, yes, we can create these clones and still give people chills, and they actually do deactivate the maladaptive schemas, specifically in the ones that were identified and not the other ones. So there is something that we're kind of calling, schema surgery, right? And people are having very profound, powerful experiences from this. We have thousands of examples of individuals reporting these types of things. So then we also asked, well, can we turn this into everything so far has been acute, right? So we asked, can we create a more longitudinal study, right? And what we did was basically for 5 days exposed participants to chills eliciting stimuli. And the headline finding that we found is that if during those 5 days, right, we're only exposed to stimuli for about, a total of 10 minutes, right? If you get 3 or more chills in that 5-day period, there's a 70% remission rate, right, up to 6 months in the future. And this is on things like the PHQ-9, the BDI, SHAPS, right, very important for anhedonia. And the effect sizes are comparable to some of the leading interventions. And importantly, and where a lot of the future work is going now, is that it also helps to promote behavioral activation, right? That's kind of the first step in CBT, is to encourage a behavioral change. And you can see from our testimonies, so many people are like, oh, I gotta call my mom, I gotta call my sister, we gotta do this resolve, right? So what's interesting is that during the longitudinal study, if you get chills during that time period, you have so much more goal ideation, motivation, and taking next day steps. And that directly correlates to the reduction in the depressive symptoms that we're seeing as well. So I just, I wanted to kind of put that all out there for you guys to digest. I don't have a conclusion slide, but I do want to thank the amazing team that helped make this possible, especially Felix and Leo, who brought this work to IACS. And thank you to our funders, and if you want to stay connected and try out some of the chills eliciting stimuli for yourself, you can scan the QR code. Thank you for your time. Hope you have a chill rest of your time in Chile.